But welcome, Sarah and Bill. It's great to have you here. I'm personally very excited about the exhibition that you have coming up next year. And so I'd like to give you guys the floor just for a few moments, just to say whatever you'd like about it, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Sure, I guess I'll start out, and Sarah, you can pick up the story, pipe in and correct me, or I'll turn it over to you. I was thinking of a way to approach this, and I guess just a little bit of background about how we came to do this exhibition. I'd actually go back a few years ago. I was doing one of the showings, public showings I do of the manuscripts here about 8 times a year. I'll do them. And that was the day I met Sarah. She was in the audience and attended, and we chatted afterwards. And she had broached the idea that day of, there really needs to be another exhibition. We could do it at the Haggerty, should really do an exhibition, since the last one we had done was back in 2004. Some of you were in attendance there. I know, Carl, you were there and delivered a talk for that, the conference that was connected to that. At the time I had so many projects going. I was like, oh, well, okay, kind of stored away the idea in my mind. But then if you fast forward to fall of 2019, there were a group of us from Marquette that went to Paris to the BNF for the exhibition there. And in that group was the dean of my library and the director of the Haggerty Museum. And the two of them kind of, while they were there, sort of taken up with the moment, sort of hatched this idea to have an exhibition at Marquette. And I remember being told about it. And I have to admit, my first reaction wasn't, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that. It was more like, oh no, that's a lot of work. And this is coming on, the heels of BNF was just opening, and it's like 3 major Tolkien exhibitions in less than 2 years. And I had a little bit of concern about maybe Tolkien fatigue out there. But they're adamant about doing it, and I found that I became much more interested in it as we moved along in the process. And I think, honestly, as an aside, I almost think there's any silver lining to the whole COVID nightmare. It's the fact that those events, Maker of Middle Earth, the Morgan, BNF, they seem like a lifetime ago. And so that's, I think, maybe people's interest in traveling to come see an exhibition has been renewed in that time. And so we thought about and started to plan what this exhibition might be like. And there was a little bit of a problem in that, I've never been involved in an exhibition before. My background is out of archival studies, not out of museum studies. And I knew that I would probably be the curator for it, but I really needed a co-curator. And the director of exhibitions at the Haggerty, Amelia Layden, fantastic woman. She's unfortunately, she's not a Tolkien fan, and so she was a little hesitant to to take on co-curating something about a topic she really didn't know anything about. And then there was a chance meeting, as they say in Middle Earth. And I guess I'll turn it over to Sarah if you want to pipe in and pick up the story at this point.
Yeah, I mean. So just, a little background about me. I'm an art historian. I'm in the art history department at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I had curated a small show at the Haggerty, worked with Amelia a few years ago. So I knew her, and I was working with her on something unrelated. And it was a conference we were planning. And somehow in the conversation, the date March 25th came up, and I hear March 25th, and I'm like, oh, Fall of Sauron Day. And everyone in the room was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, no, don't worry about it. And I was like, it's a Tolkien thing. And that just kind of prompted this Amelia saying, oh, actually, we're talking about a Tolkien exhibition, and she wasn't quite sure how it was going to develop. And I basically kind of shoved myself in there and was like, I have ideas, please let me be involved. And so then she, put me in contact with Bill. That was when we reconnected, and it seemed immediately like it was a good synergy. I speaking of chance encounters, my involvement is the product of a lot of luck and a lot of serendipity. And one of the things that has been really valuable, I think, for me in conceiving of how we were going to approach this was the fact that I I got to see Maker of Middle-earth both in Oxford and in at the Morgan. I didn't see the BNF show, but I was familiar with it in those two iterations. And a really crucial point for me in that experience of seeing it in Oxford was I saw it at the very tail end of its run, which actually coincided with the very beginning of the British Library's Anglo-Saxon Kingdoms show. So it was like the same week that I saw all of this Tolkien material, some of which I had seen at Marquette, but much of which I hadn't seen in person before. It was at the same time that I saw, Domesday Book for the first time, saw the Beowulf manuscript. And that was really, knowing somewhat about Tolkien's experience as a philologist and as a medieval scholar, it just, the synergy of those two exhibitions was really, really illuminating for me. So I think that combined with having seen the shows in the two places and just kind of in my own mind at various points thinking like, oh, if I were going to do a Tolkien exhibition following up on those major, monumental, excellent shows, like what would I do? So when Amelia and Bill kind of brought me in, it was not difficult to kind of hit the ground running because it was something that I had been thinking about. And it, like I said, I think Bill and I were on a very similar wavelength in terms of not wanting what went up at Marquette to appear in any way as kind of a tack on to those to those previous shows, or, trying to replicate that, but really trying to be its own project with its own narratives, its own themes, and hopefully, new ideas and scholarship and conversations that will propel Tolkien studies forward rather than seeming like, again, a tack on of what great work Catherine and other people had done with those exhibitions.
Yeah, the title of the exhibition is J.R.R. Tolkien, The Art of the Manuscript. So it's the manuscript tradition that's really at the heart of it. So thinking about it in comparison to the other shows, it's not framed biographically. So you won't, in our show, you're not going to find his pipe or his academic gown or his or fan mail, that sort of thing. It's far more focused on the manuscript tradition that he was familiar with and was operating in, and how that tradition has evolved over time. So that's the real heart of it. So it's no attempt to kind of rival those great exhibitions, which had I think those of you who saw them, they had an element of meet J.R.R. Tolkien. It was kind of broad, introducing people to him, particularly the BNF show, because I know that they were really interested in making Tolkien appeal more to a French audience to build support for him, since he's not as popular, obviously, in France as he is in, say, the UK or the Netherlands. So we really don't have that kind of meet J.R.R. Tolkien. It's a bit more, I would say, academic in terms of the scope or the focus of the exhibition itself. A question that's probably on a lot of people's minds is there going to be a book along with it that collectors might want to have? And yes, we do dream of having a book. We are discussing that now, what that will look like. It's not going to be, it's going to be more, I think our hope, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarah, but I think our hope is more of a catalog, which might have essays from the co-curators, me and Sarah, and then have images of all the items in the exhibition. But we're not really going to turn it into something like the Maker of Middle-earth volume with the essays at the beginning, which again sort of introduced the reader to Tolkien in the various facets of Tolkien, or like they did with the Voyage to Middle-earth book at the BNF. It's going to be more of a catalog guide, which we're confident will be, can sit respectably alongside either of those books on a bookshelf somewhere.
And I'll just add briefly, the idea of the manuscript tradition, that's the focal point, or kind of the narrative thrust of the show. It does manifest in multiple ways. So, we like the idea of thinking about the manuscript, one, because it ties back to his work with manuscripts and with medieval texts and the way, I mean, the pages of the Book of Mizarble was really kind of the starting point, and especially the draft pages that are in Marquette's collection, which are just, you know, fascinating convergences of all these different ideas about texts and materials and transmission. So, you know, it's about manuscripts as these objects that he was very familiar with. It's also about manuscripts as, you know, kind of unpublished working processes of an artist, or well, an artist and an author. And it also ties into the way that manuscripts are understood and sort of cataloged and processed today. So, I mean, Bill's great work on the manuscript, the Tolkien Manuscript Processing Project, you know, that will be a feature of the exhibition, how, you know, these very complex, rich, robust collections of manuscripts, like how do you deal with all of those? And Bill deals with those on a daily basis. It's not a static thing, it's an ongoing process. And, you know, one of the really exciting things that will be available if you are able to come see it is Bill's been working with some of the IT people at Marquette to kind of create an interactive part of the exhibition where you can see, and I guess some of you probably have been familiar with this or might have gotten a sort of insight into it through the Facebook group, but, you know, you can see how ideas or certain quotes kind of, and Bill can talk more about this than I can, but just as a kind of, you know, just heads up, like see how different quotes or different passages changed over the course of different manuscripts over the time of his writing. So, you know, if you hear the term manuscript and think like, oh, it's just going to be some boring medieval thing, like it's really taking a broad approach to the idea of manuscripts and how they wend their way into Tolkien scholarship, into his writing, and even into how we think about his materials and how they're understood in you know, in a place like the archives today.
Yeah, Sarah mentions the interactive piece. I had some of you might, if you on Facebook, if you follow the Tolkien Society or the Mythopoeic Society, I had posted sort of a question like, what are your favorite lines or brief passage from the Lord of the Rings? And it was a terrific response to it. And so I went through and I studied and basically isolated and narrowed it down to the top 12 favorite lines or most popular lines. And then, so what people will be able to do is some of these iconic lines in the book, you can then be able to kind of go through and see the evolution of those passages in the different iterations from the very first scribbled concept of it through the different versions, the typescripts, the galleys, to ultimately the published version. So that I think people will find that kind of interesting because they'll immediately see lines that, oh, I love that line, I love that passage. You know, it's wonderful. It's a great sentence, and then you can kind of see how it evolved, whether it went through a lot of changes or whether it just sprang brilliantly, you know, as is out of his mind.
You had you did a presentation at Tolkien 2019, I think, that I remember this vast poster strip that you put up on the wall that was kind of tracking some of his manuscript documents that you had and versions of that. Is that something similar going to be a part of this exhibition?
I'd like to work that in. What Jeremy's describing, if you weren't in Birmingham in 2019, is an enormous project we began, which actually Marquette had wanted to do going back to 1990. but finally we have the technology and the resources to begin to undertake it a few years ago. And it's basically a mapping project of the manuscript collection to map all the component parts and drafts. So imagine taking the incredible work that Christopher Tolkien did in History of Middle-earth, awe-inspiring work he did, and sort of taking that and then mapping it out in detail, how the different drafts relate to each other in terms of chronologically the order in which he composed the books, but also within certain chapters to be able to track and follow the different versions of parts of the book. So imagine it's a huge jigsaw puzzle, all the different pieces of the manuscript collection, and then trying to arrange them in order, which can help researchers, because the whole point of it is not just, isn't this cool? The whole point of it is to make the collection more accessible to people visiting Marquette who want to use the manuscript collection, and so that they can navigate through it and identify what they want to look at and understand what they're seeing. So that's the whole point of it. And so it culminated in a large draft of a map, working map that we had up at the hotel in Birmingham. And I would like to try to incorporate that to some degree into the exhibition. What that will look like exactly, I'm not sure. In a way, it's so, since we do want this exhibition to appeal to not just to scholars, but to a general audience, just kind of throwing that out as is, it would be overwhelming. People would be like, what? This is just crazy. And so the kiosk idea with the quotes was sort of a way to make it more accessible to your casual fan who's maybe visiting. But I would like to work that broader project in somehow. That work's been ongoing. I had posted a little bit on Facebook about this. We've been making progress. John Ratliff, Marquette alumnus and Tolkien scholar, has been visiting for the last few years with the mapping, helping with the mapping of that. And just recently, we've begun to really look at creating a system to be able to deliver that digitally. Eric Mueller-Harder, some of you may know, software designer, and also presents specifically on Tolkien's maps. That's kind of a niche he's carved out for himself for his expertise. We're working with him to design a system that we'd be able to use to deliver these manuscripts to people so that they can kind of navigate through and use them. Unfortunately, given the copyright situation, of course, this is not something, sadly, we can't just like put it all up online and have this massive Tolkien portal where you could go in and you could browse through 11,000 manuscript pages however you want, jumping all over the place. And so it's really got to be handled on site here at Marquette, but my goal is to make the collection easier for people to work with when they come here, because I think that the way the collection here has evolved, there have been some obstacles to people really digging in and doing some new kind of research with it.
Bill, I know we've talked about, what we can and can't say, or, people asking what is going to be in it, what may, and things are still very much in flux, but, Bill, I hope I won't get in trouble with you or other people for sharing one thing that will be in there. And I'm bringing this up mostly because Carl is here, and Carl, it's nice to meet you, sort of virtually. But I just wanted to throw out that because this is appropriate. It's a small enough group. I don't think it'll, shatter the thrust of the exhibition or the surprises that will be in there. But I watched Carl's interview on Nerd of the Rings, and when you talked about the manuscript with the tears on it, I immediately wrote to Bill and I was like, we have to have that in the show if that's there, and it's going to be presumably in the show. So it's on our working checklist right now. So
that's great to hear. I held that in my hands at one point when I was visiting the archives, and it was just, I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Never forget it.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful piece.
Yeah. Thank you, Tolkien community, for sharing these kinds of things, which are, again, that was just, I don't know, Bill, I mean, right after you did that interview, I think I saw it the day it came out and emailed Bill right away. So
if I had to come up with a list of things to show, that would be number one.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I'm glad we could fulfill that. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask a question about what's going to be in it. In particular, I'm quite keen that hopefully that you're going to put in some of the manuscripts that aren't as popular. So I'm hoping that something from Mr. Bliss is going to be in there, and Farmer Giles of Ham. Do you think you can have space to show some of those?
Those appeared at the BNF show in Paris. We do not have plans to have Mr. Bliss or Farmer Giles in the exhibition. We do have a number of items, though, that have never been exhibited or published before, that will be appearing both from Marquette's collection, and also from the Bodleian. And I have to be careful talking about the Bodleian loans because the situation with that is we made a request to them, and they're keen to participate. I mean, they liked the idea, and the Tolkien estate liked the idea of the exhibition. But the trustees of the Bodleian, they meet a few times a year, and that's when they kind of go over and review and okay the loans that will be made out of the collections there. And we have not heard the official response back. So we've sent them a list, and I guess I could say that there are 37 items on the list that we sent, but we don't have 100%. We haven't heard back officially yet that it passed through that meeting and that all of them have been okayed. So I have to be kind of careful about saying what might be there, because it may turn out that some of it may not be available, or they may not be willing to send. But there are items, I would say, probably of the stuff at the Bodleian that we would be requesting. Probably half of it has been exhibited or published before. Another maybe quarter has been maybe published in something like Wayne and Christina's work, but not actually ever exhibited. And then I think there's probably a quarter of things that haven't been exhibited and haven't appeared in publications before. So that's kind of exciting. And then within Marquette's collection, since we're focusing really on the manuscript tradition, we're pulling a lot of stuff that maybe wouldn't necessarily be seen or have been seen before. Items that maybe show the evolution of his handwriting, the scripts he used, the calligraphy. Also material drawn from the appendices, some wonderful stuff in there. The sort of showing the analytic kind of delivery he did of information, and how he's kind of drawing on an older tradition when he's presenting that material in the appendices, and so things like that. So I think people will hopefully get a good. We'll see something new and something they haven't seen before at Marquette. It's not just a rehash of the favorites. Hopefully there is enough in the core of it that because there will be things that appeared at these other shows that will be here, and hopefully that will give people who didn't have an opportunity to get to New York or to Oxford or to Paris to get a sense, or to be able to see some of these things. Particularly, I have to admit, kind of in the central United States, because we're in the Midwest. They sometimes derisively called flyover country, between the coasts. And so it'd be nice to allow people in the American Midwest a chance to be able to come to Milwaukee and be able to see some of these things. So I hate to disappoint you, Andrew, but I can tell you we don't have plans for Mr. Bliss or Farmer Giles in there.
A lot of our decisions come down to, or thinking comes down to, ultimately, and it's unfortunate for like the deep Tolkien fans who want to read the stuff and see all the drafts, is a lot of the decisions come down to what is visually interesting and what visually and materially kind of works together. And there, don't get me wrong, there will be a lot of text, and there will be a lot of text that, as Bill said, hasn't been published or exhibited before. But, thousands of pages of manuscripts that are his writing, which is difficult to read, like, even if you're familiar with it. So, yeah, of course, like, we're not going to be able to put everything in, but hopefully it will be visually compelling. Everything that we put in there will be visually compelling.
Well, you should definitely
make a couple of comments.
Challenging text from Tolkien.
What's that?
Well, what normally happens is that you normally show the first page of his writing where he's actually quite good. No one tends to show the 10th or 11th page where it's virtually, I don't even know how he read it himself by that point. So it'd be quite nice, I think, to show some of those, actually, just the challenge that, say, Christopher and Carl has in actually trying to decipher this.
There will be some of that. I mean, some of the things we have chosen, especially if there may be some interesting visual text on the page, but the rest of the page might be just a nightmare. The one that Sarah brought up that Carl loves so much, with Tolkien's tear stains on it. from the Field of Cormallen chapter. I mean, that's a classic. When you see that, that's just like a classic page of nightmare handwriting. I mean, it's just, he's in the zone. It's coming out, and it's not pretty.
Yeah. So could I add a couple of comments?
Sure.
I wanted to say, I'm really glad that you're focusing on the manuscripts, because for several reasons. The Bodleian exhibit, and I believe the BNF exhibit as well, were very focused on Tolkien's personal life and on his artwork. Whereas, he spent his time making manuscripts far more than he spent time making art. So I love this idea. And I'd also would say that you guys are really uniquely positioned to tell the story of Tolkien's magnum opus from draft through to the printed copy. I'm not aware of any other such manuscript collection that could do that. So I think you chose very well what to focus on, and you have a great story to tell. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I'll say that was one of our thinking was, or one of our kind of points of entry was, when I got involved, I started thinking about, well, what can we do to really focus on what makes Marquette's collection distinct? The Bodleian, it can't compete with what the Bodleian has, because they have very different strengths, and that is what is core to Marquette's collection. It's the the manuscripts, the working through these stories, and so I'm glad you point that out, Carl, because that was something that we were really keen on emphasizing here. Because I knew as a Tolkien nerd, like I knew when I moved to Milwaukee, I'm not from Milwaukee, but I knew when I moved here and was sort of like, oh, that'd be great if I could do something with the Tolkien collections at some point. But I know people who are Tolkien fans who are from the Midwest, from Milwaukee, from Wisconsin, and had no idea that these things are here. So, drawing attention to that and really opening them up, as Bill said, like to the region, I think was important for all of us.
Yeah, agreed. Well, just one more comment. There's a memorial volume for Christopher Tolkien coming out next year from the Bodleian. And I've contributed, my contribution to that is called Editing the Tolkienian Manuscript. And I show you the ropes. And I actually spent the time to tabulate in the 4 texts that I chose to present in this, to tabulate all of the examples of Tolkien's, let us say, idiosyncratic handwriting. And although that vast table is not in the book, there's a link to it, and it'll be online. So anybody who has to face the challenge of reading Tolkien's handwriting in the future, you'll have a little bit. I call it a guide for the perplexed. So you'll have that to help.
That's fantastic, Carl.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's dawned on me over the years. I was like, somebody should just do a concentrated study of the various forms of his penmanship, the various forms that they can take, because it's just breathtaking, the range of his writing. Yes,
indeed.
It's very comforting to look at his chicken scratch, because my handwriting is god awful. And then you see these beautiful calligraphic pages, and then it's like, then you see his manuscript pages, like, oh, okay, that's not that different than my terrible handwriting.
I was certainly glad some of it was typed. I have to say, it's a lot easier to read.
Yeah, when you come across a typescript in Tolkien's manuscripts, it's like that blank page in the examination booklet. Glorious, Yeah.
We have a question here. It's Frode.
Yeah, I guess it's a question maybe for Carl. Did you look into software that can learn and help decipher his handwriting?
No, I haven't. I mean,
I
suppose theoretically it could be done with, like a neural network. But no, I mean, it would take a vast amount of time to train a neural network on all of his handwriting styles. And they change over time. It's not static. So I, for example, can look at it pretty much any manuscript and tell you probably within 10 years when it was written. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but it's not something that I would be able to spend time on doing. So
one other kind of aspect to the manuscript angle that I did want to, something that someone said made me think of this was, well, so in terms of background of planning, I mean, before COVID hit, Bill and I were planning to go to the UK and actually look at the Bodleian collections in person, and that didn't happen. And Catherine was wonderful in offering to do these virtual viewings for us so that we could make selections and see things. And those were really great experiences. And one of the points that we were really keen on looking into were elements of his scholarship that are in the archives over there. And I think a good chunk of the materials that you won't have seen before comes from his scholarship. And, you know, I'd say from my perspective, I mean, I have a bit of imposter syndrome. Well, just being an academic, one always has imposter syndrome, but I think if you're a good academic, you have imposter syndrome. But, you know, I probably appear to be coming completely out of left field. I'm an art historian. I've never published on Tolkien before, and I don't work on 20th century art history or medieval art history. I work on the 19th century, but where I think my strength comes in looking through this material is one of the things I'm very interested in is how historical information is represented in texts in museums and popular scholarship and popular publications in the period kind of leading up to when he comes into academia. So one of the things that I got really excited to learn about early on in this research process was the development of new manuscript facsimile technology. So like microfilm, photographic microfilm facsimiles of medieval manuscripts was a completely new technology when he was early in his scholarly career. So when you look at something like the Book of Mizarble pages, you know, that is replicating this new technology for historical and scholarly research. So, you know, the Tolkien fan might look through the finding aid of the Bodleian and go straight to the manuscripts, or, you know, straight to stuff that comes from the legendarium that you're familiar with. And Bill and I were like, we want to look at, you know, the charts of vowel changes.
Yeah, the Vespasian Psalter and things like that.
Yeah. So, you know, I think those will be things that will be surprising, and hopefully in a good way, if you're able to come and see the show, and if not, that will appear in the publication as well.
Are you going to have associated?
You had me at vowel changes.
Yeah, my quick question, are you going to have associated material, so not from Tolkien, but to kind of set contextual relations or show other material he might have been inspired from, things like that?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we're definitely, in fact, drawing upon this, and Sarah, you can talk more about it, but drawing upon the sort of facsimile tradition, showing examples of the sorts of things that Tolkien likely would have been working with, since, I mean, he was familiar with medieval manuscripts, but it's not like he was, I think, popping in and dealing with the originals all the time. He was relying on facsimiles to study them. So we'll definitely have that presence in the collection as well. There are a couple other things which we don't know yet that I don't want to say too much about, because we don't know that we'll get them for sure. But do you have anything to add, Sarah?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those kind of another moment of kind of logistical serendipity because when we first started talking about this manuscript angle, it was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could get like Bodley 34 or Junius 11, you know, the medieval, you know, the Anglo-Saxon manuscripts that we know, like, he worked on and he would have seen at the Bodleian. But then, I mean, I was not even going to attempt to suggest that we ask the British Library to loan us the one Beowulf manuscript, you know, like that would never happen. That would never leave their premises. But then the more we looked into it and talked about it, was like, on a day-to-day basis, he wouldn't have been looking at the originals. He would have been looking at reproductions. And there are layers of translation and mediation that come with that you then see manifest in the, the Book of the Mizarbil is the great example of that. But you see it a lot also in in the appendices when he's talking, all these, it's like the Thane's book, or I'm forgetting different. When I was reading it, when I did my last read through, I sent Bill so many messages that were like, anything in the manuscript about, the role of all the names of hobbits who were involved in the, the scouring of the Shire, and things that he mentioned that he didn't ultimately flesh out, but that kind of, that is the history. That's how manuscripts have always worked. Some things don't last and we only have mentions of them. And but yeah, so one other little thing that I'll bring up, I don't think we're actually going to have a facsimile of the object in the show, but we will at least have in reproduction some way, either along with the labels or in the publication, the facsimile or reproduction of the facsimile that has the mention of Arundel. So that name that then spawned this whole part of this whole major story. The page itself isn't a super visually interesting thing, but it is so important, so we will mention it and bring it in there. But yeah, the facsimiles will be not the dominant portion of the exhibition, but will be a major portion of it, and I think will provide a lot of insight that even really big Tolkien fans might not have thought about before.
I promise to not keep interjecting myself in here, but for those who are curious, Tolkien would certainly have used two facsimile productions in particular from the Early English Text Society. One is Sulpicia's facsimile edition of the Beowulf manuscript,
Which
and the
we will
second
have.
is Gollancx's facsimile edition of I don't remember if it's just Gawain, but the Gawain and the Green Knight.
I think that also has Pearl in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these are still available from the Early English Text Society, or at least they were last time I looked. So
I think you can definitely find them on Hathi Trust. They might also be on archive.org, but yeah. So those, thank you for bringing that up. And those are ones that the pizza will definitely be in there. The Gollancx will be mentioned, even if the facsimile itself is not in there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you guys have a lot of work left to do between now and exhibition opening. I assume the Haggerty's got space earmarked and you're figuring out layout and once you know what materials you have, et cetera. That's going to be a lot of work for you guys.
It will be, yeah. Next year is going to be really crazy. Next summer, especially when all the threads come together there before the build, is going to be pretty intense. As many of you know, Tolkien was very careful to use every bit of paper that he could get his hands on, and so in some cases we have things where we want to show it's on both sides of the manuscript leaf, and so we have to devise a delivery, be able to build out so that people can see both sides and not just be limited to one side face up in a case. So it's a bit of a challenge we have to overcome, but we've got ideas.
And there are great people at the Haggerty who do this for a living and do a very good job. So
excellent. Yeah, I haven't been to Marquette or the Haggerty yet, so I'm really looking forward. I'm priming my family on a trip, whether it's just me or all of them, but we're carving out a big chunk of time to hopefully come see things. But
Milwaukee in the fall is lovely, so I highly recommend it. I'm a cold weather person though, so if you're not, maybe it won't be as lovely for you, but
we'll enjoy it, I'm sure. Yeah, so any other questions from the audience here? You guys are welcome to chime in. I can keep going, no problem. But about how big do you plan on having the exhibition? Just not like square footage layout, but maybe a visualization of number of items or comparing it to some of the prior exhibitions, just as far as the sizing goes? I'm interested to know.
I think the sizing and layout is probably more, it's certainly not as big as the BNF, which I think was like square miles of space they had in the meter on building there. And I think it's maybe a little bit smaller spatially than Maker of Middle Earth, maybe more along the lines of the Morgan space. But in terms of total, we're looking at over 100 items. That's our goal. The exact number again may fluctuate depending on what we can get from the Bodleian, and also what finally comes out of Marquette's collection, because I've been told that oftentimes, in those harried moments or those months before when you're doing the build, it's like sometimes once you actually see it up, you realize, oh, we need to shift this, or let's swap it out and have this piece instead because it fits better in there in that spot. So there may be some of that going on as well.
Makes it challenging to make a catalog of the exhibition too, when you're trying to make some of those choices and you already have a print deadline to get.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, Amelia is a wonderful project manager. She's very calm and keeps us on task and doesn't get us. We create enough anxiety for ourselves, and she's good at calming us down.
Excellent.
I know that when the exhibition was on the BNF, they appeared for some weird reason to be very surprised at how popular it was, which I can't really understand. It didn't help all their staff went on strike as well. But are you geared up for it being extremely popular? Because they couldn't really cope to begin with. They had some big problems with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, we're definitely aware of it. The Morgan in New York, I think they were totally caught off guard by the response. People were lined up all around the block and they weren't expecting that. And so, yeah, we are trying to be, realizing how popular it will be. We're trying to just, impose some control over it, in the sense of probably in January that the tickets will go on sale. Start going on sale so people can claim their tickets and their ticket spots. And it'll be similar to the way that the other venues, or at least the Bodleian set it up, where you may have a certain time frame in which you enter the exhibition, and that's what your ticket time is for, to sort of control the flow in, so it's not just a complete log jam at the door. And yeah, we'll see. Certainly, we have one of the nice things about these prior exhibitions, like the BNF and like the Morgan and like in Oxford, is that we can kind of learn from their challenges or their mistakes. So, how best to cope with enormous numbers of people wanting to show up and do this, but. In a way, though, it is an element of, it's new for us. The Haggerty really, I don't think, has hosted probably an exhibition that might have this sort of turnout this intensely before. So it will be a learning experience for us, but hopefully we can manage it okay.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, good luck. I hope that it works, because obviously I think one of the problems is that how do you know how many people are going to go? It's just you no idea really, have you? That's the issue.
Yeah, and I think
lots.
I think Bill and I have done our best to really emphasize to the Haggerty staff, who again are not as familiar with Tolkien fandom, that it could be people lined up around campus to get in there. And just as a side note to that, one thing that I think Bill and I were both, and the people at the Haggerty are very mindful of, is the fact that, the Haggerty is Marquette's art museum, and part of their mission is, it's not solely for the Marquette community, but that is part of their mission is it's a pedagogical museum that is dedicated to Marquette and, the community around it. So there are some logistical concerns also with, wanting to make it accessible to everyone who's at Marquette. That's the core contingency of the Haggerty's audience. But I think that also shaped a lot of our thinking on what the exhibition would be. It's in an institution that isn't just about Tolkien or Tolkien fandom. It's a university museum, it's a university art museum, and it's there to serve that community, which consists of, religious scholars, arts and humanities scholars. So part of the narrative thrust also had to do with opening up avenues that could be productive, not just for Tolkien fans, but for people who are taking, medieval literature classes or art classes or things like that.
You might even have Jeff Bezos show up. He was at the Morgan opening.
Yeah, I think Bill told me, did you go up to him and
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I said, well, first I was sitting near the front of the auditorium when they were doing the panel discussion with Verlin and Catherine. And I saw this man being ushered in to the front row. And I said, gosh, he looks familiar. That's Jeff Bezos. And this was the time when all this controversy about his divorce was blowing up. So I'm sitting there behind Jeff Bezos, and I'm seeing all these alerts come up about Jeff Bezos on my iPhone. That was very strange. And his son was there. I think the son is a major Tolkien fan. So he just might show up. But yes, I did. I said, Mr. Bezos, I just have to take this opportunity. Thank you for helping me spend many, many thousands of dollars on books over the years. So
he does have a TV series coming out that's loosely related, isn't it?
I think I've heard about that. Yeah.
That's it's launching, I think, a month before your exhibition. So there'll be
It actually is it's September 2nd is when it premieres, and we open August 19th. So we'll actually, and it's serendipitous. We didn't plan it that way, of course, but so that's a kind of an added, I guess, boost is people who, assuming the show's any good, it may get people wanting to come and learn more about Tolkien. So it may actually draw more people to Marquette.
Actually, absolutely. A related exhibition. So another moment of serendipity. I happened to be on a conference panel with the medieval manuscript curator, or one of them at the Getty, and turns out the Getty is putting on an exhibition about fantasy and medievalisms that was supposed to be next summer, but it's been delayed, so it'll actually coincide with this exhibition. And Larissa Grolman, who's the curator, co-curator on that, she said her kind of shorthand way of describing it to people, which is not totally accurate, but is kind of Grimm's to Game of Thrones. So very much linked to the kinds of things we're exploring, but the scope is much bigger, and the Getty has a lot more money. So it'll probably be more comprehensive that way, but just to put that on your radar, that's happening, and we're hopefully going to do some kind of joint programming. That's still in the works, but more TBA on that front.
Yeah, I know it's too early to speak to it all, but I assume you have some plans for some programming sprinkled through the exhibition, so it's not all front-loaded, everybody coming opening weekend and then having seen it. I'm very interested to know, and again, this isn't fishing for info, it's way too early, but I know I'm excited to hear what's going to be wrapped around it, and even just seeing what else is going on in the Marquette area. I mean, it's my first time there. I'm really looking forward to seeing more than just one exhibition hall. So.
Yeah, we're definitely working on programming that. Yeah, I can't say much about it because it's not really set, but we would like to have some events over the run of the time. So it's not, like you say, just front loaded with maybe speaking events at the very beginning and then nothing for the rest of it. Again, it's nice to have the BNF and Oxford and the Morgan as examples to sort of see what they did, and then sort of pick it and maybe create a package of programming based off of what seemed like really good ideas that they did. So there will be that for sure. And yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot to do in Milwaukee. I know I think there's some big events in the fall in Milwaukee. So there should be plenty to see when you come. I mean, it's like Sarah said, it's beautiful in the fall, in the autumn, and it's a really, I think, a beautiful city, Milwaukee. So hopefully it's by this enormous body of fresh water, like Michigan, which is just mind-boggling to think that this massive lake, it's all fresh water. It's just, yeah, it's quite lovely. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Do you have anything to add about the programming, Sarah?
No, I mean, I think, we will try to have a variety of types of programs and types of speakers. So, we definitely want to, we're looking to have, people who are with deep knowledge of Tolkien's works, but, also potentially have programs that maybe aren't so focused on him and his work, but kind of relate to these other threads. But yeah, all of that is still, I mean, right. Just in terms of where our thinking is right now, we're kind of in this mode of like, the checklist needs to get relatively finalized, like in the next couple of weeks. So all else is not really on my brain right now.
I have one practical question, Bill and Sarah. I haven't been out there for a while now, as you know. I know there are some hotels out there that are less than desirable, let's say. Could you send us at some point maybe a recommended list of hotels in the area? And I'm going to guess that it's probably best to book as far in advance as possible. So anyways.
Did you have a particular experience? I'm really curious now.
I did not actually.
Are you thinking about the hotel where Jeffrey Dahmer killed some people? Because that's right near Marquette.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. Okay, I don't know. That might be an attraction for some people. Yeah. No, I don't know what the hotel situation is like there anymore. I don't even remember now which one I stayed at last time I was out there. But I haven't had personally any really bad experience.
I'm happy to report their hotel space is really something that the city has, especially in the downtown area, has expanded upon. Okay. I mean, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Gen Con, the great gaming convention that actually started in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and then for many years was in Milwaukee downtown at the convention center. Milwaukee lost that to Indianapolis in part because of the city did not have enough hotel rooms to support a convention that large, and so there's been a concerted effort to build out new hotels in the downtown area. So yeah, I mean, we probably should as we go here and get ready to have the tickets go on sale to try and have listings of different hotels in the area, just to give people a sense of what the different options are. I know Airbnb is quite big in Milwaukee as well, so some visitors will seek that out. There's a number of those near campus, and so there hopefully there should be plenty of good housing opportunities. Generally, if you go between Marquette and in terms of like quality of hotel, this is a sweeping generalization, but if you go between Marquette and the lake, you're probably better off than heading out west of campus generally. Okay.
So Jeremy, maybe they have their own shark house.
I was just going to say the Headington Shark House was an Airbnb outside Oxford, and we had, I want to say 9, maybe 11 people who stayed there for the opening weekend. It was a little mini conference of Tolkien scholars and fans in that house. That was excellent. So I'm having pleasant flashbacks.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Any other questions on the exhibition? I know I wanted to chat some more, Bill, with you about some other things Marquette's going on, but it's probably less interesting for Sarah. So before,
yeah,
and you're welcome to stay, Sarah.
Yeah, I have a issue that at 3 minutes I have at 2 o'clock. Awesome. I have my some interviews coming in for that fandom oral history project that I have to make. So I'm going to have to cut out here to get onto those meetings to gather those interviews. So I'll have to, unfortunately, take off.
No problem. We did a good job filling the hour. This was
Yeah,
very
it went by
pleasant.
very fast.
Thank you, Bill and Sarah, very much. That was incredibly pleasant to have you here, get an early view of what you guys are thinking and help build excitement for this exhibition. I know I'm really looking forward to it.
It's good to talk to people who are already excited about it. It helps keep our enthusiasm up.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.